Welcome everyone. I'm your host Prabal Gupta and you are listening to the Capital Analyst. Today is our 10th episode and we have a special guest today, Miss Sanjana Ramachandran. Sanjana is a writer, a marketer and an engineer. She currently works as an independent author and marketing consultant. She graduated in electronics engineering from BITS Pilani, worked for a couple of years in software development at Oracle and Amazon and followed it up with an MBA from IIM Calcutta. She has worked at P&G as a senior brand manager for around 2 years before she moved to her current role. Her articles on business, tech, and culture appear in leading magazines such as the Caravan, the Print, 52.in, Rest of the World, the Ken, and Riot magazine. To describe her in her own words, she is a die-hard generalist who also an English specialist. Tune in as we talk more about her life, her writings, her future projects, as well as current trends in advertising and marketing. Welcome to the show, Sanjana. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Prabal. I'm very flattered that you took the time to go through my work and introduce me so nicely. I think it's everybody's dream to have someone who thinks about what they put out and has questions for it, right? So thank you for the honor.
I think
looking forward to an insightful conversation.
Yeah. So let's start with your journey. So as after your engineering from BITS Pilani, you worked for a couple of years in software, then decided to pursue an MBA, worked as a marketer, and then finally decided to make it out on your own as a freelance writer and marketing consultant. So what were the inflection points in this journey? What was going through your mind as you made these changes and finally ended up where you are right now?
Yeah, I think that's a question that I'm grappling with almost every day now as I try to string together a narrative of why I'm doing what I'm doing, how I got to be here, and what does this lead to. So engineering, I think, it's the most common choice that kids in India get into. But I remember in 10th, I was in Chennai for a break with my family, and when I came back, I found out that most of the people I went to school with had already enrolled into what they were going to do in 11th and 12th. Some of my friends went into the arts stream. I didn't know anyone who was doing commerce, and then most of my friends actually joined IIT coaching classes. So I told my mom, I think you should be telling me what to do. All my friends have already chosen one thing or the other, and I need to join something quickly. And I spoke to a couple of friends, and they told me that I might enjoy whatever JEE coaching involves. And I thought about I was at that time, I used to read a lot, but I also really did enjoy science. So I thought, why not? Even though I didn't really understand what is engineering, right? Like you make a car, you don't really find out what engineering is until you do it. So yeah, I was happy to study for 1 year. I think it was pretty serious JEE and stuff. But second year, it's sort of like when you realize that you're not doing as well as you'd like to, your enthusiasm peters out. But I was happy to do engineering. I had a great time at BITS Pilani, Goa, actually. I was in the Goa campus, and very formative time in my life because BITS doesn't have attendance, and it sort of allows you to explore intellectually and physically everything that you could possibly be interested in, right? So I was heavily into drama and the literary clubs there. We worked on a magazine that remains one of the things that I look back to as a most fun time, formative time in my life. So my time there at BITS, although it was in STEM, it opened me to the idea that maybe I'm interested in more creative pursuits. But at the same time, there was a part of me that loved the idea of, being in science and tech in some ways. So I knew what I studied, which is electronics, was probably not something that I'd want to get into. But coding is all the more popular as an option now. But even back then, it had a certain allure to it. And I was like, what if I learn coding somehow and get a job in software? And what if I turn out to really enjoy that? And I did. I would say I don't think I explored it entirely. I worked at Oracle for a year and Amazon for about 9 months, and it was a very tumultuous time in your adult life, right? 22, everyone around you by then is now hitting the next milestone. Like some people are going to do CAT, some people are getting their jobs, maybe moving to startups, etc. So I gave my CAT exam on a whim because everyone again was doing it, and I was like, maybe this will be interesting. I ended up doing well. And I was like, this is not, and especially when I told my family that they were like, this is not something you should just let go of. Why don't you give it your best shot? And I was not, although I was not sure that, I was done with tech. I think I felt like I was done with it for now. I was like, my curiosity is probably much lower than what it was at the start. And Amazon was not exactly, I worked in 2 teams at Amazon. I'm sure you've heard about the culture, right? So it wasn't always fun. So I ended up, going full steam ahead into my prep. I'd gotten shortlist from Calcutta, Lucknow, Indore, bunch of the other IIMs, and I was like, if Calcutta works out, I think it's a good enough bet. Otherwise, I can continue. And Calcutta, fortunately, did end up working out. And I think with my MBA, I was much clearer that I wanted to do marketing, given my aptitude for not aptitude, I would say my inclination for creative pursuits, because marketing is a lot of storytelling and advertising, right? Like at that time, I still had this naive, outsider view that marketing is kind of mostly advertising. So you get there and you work on a bunch of ads and you get to decide what you tell a lot of people and you convince them and you do a great job as a storyteller. So I was like, that's what I want to do. And I'm actually in hindsight very glad that I had that natural pull towards something, because when you get into one of the IIMs or a B school in India, I think in general, the students are very geared to believe that they need to do what will make them most successful in the eyes of everyone else. So there's Calcutta is known for finance, P is known for academically, very strong background. A is known for, say, marketing, consulting. I don't know what they are anymore, actually, but there were these associations. So people in C were very clear about finance or consulting and stuff like that. I was glad that I did not get really swayed and then end up doing another thing that I was just doing because everybody else was doing. And yeah, so marketing worked out well. PNG was a great place to work at. I think everything that I know about what to do on the job comes from there, because although theoretically whatever you study in MBA is probably still more useful on the job than engineering, it's only when you actually do things that you realize how something works, right? So I owe a lot of the way I think professionally to my time at PNG, to the mentors I had there and stuff like that. So I don't know if this answers your question. I think I just went on a very long chronological order of what I did and why I did it, I think, but let me know if you have any follow-up.
Yeah, no, it definitely answers my question. So you talked about how your perception of marketing was based around advertising and how in reality it turned out to be slightly different. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, what was your experience at PNG? What did your work entail?
Yeah. So I think a lot of what people on the outside, when they look at an ad, they're like, I want to be someone who is associated with that, or who makes that ad, or who says this is what the actors should say, or this is what the script should be. That's the work that's done by a creative advertising agency. Advertising agencies work with marketing teams in marketing, or people in marketing roles to basically what happens is somebody who is a marketing manager will say that he has a whole view of how much to sell, basically, right? The marketer's job could be P&L management, profit, or make certain profits, achieve certain growth targets. And this is true at a startup as well. You have growth marketing, many streams of marketing, but very broadly at the highest level, it's someone who's in charge for driving business revenue, profit, etc. So he will have a whole view of, maybe I can get profits by removing these inefficiencies and the way I distribute my goods to stores, or where I'm spending my money on ads. Maybe I can, so you can optimize various things. So telling stories so that people come to you and take the action that you want them to take is one small part of that whole umbrella of your broad business goal. And so the marketer who has that view of this is my business goal, here are all the moving parts to it, and here's what I need to tell the consumer so that he comes to me either to check out my webpage or to buy something on it or something like that. That's the brief that he comes up with for an ad agency, who then takes that brief and then writes an ad for it. So when you join, you realize that marketing, there used to be this thing on rule of thumb on B school campuses that if you have project management experience, which is managing fests, or you've led a team to produce something, that's good for your marketing CV, because that shows that you can manage things. And then you come up when you realize why they look for that, right? Because marketing in the job itself is a lot of stakeholder management. You need to get things done from different people. You need to convince your bosses or your people you work with, that this is what you need to do, why you need to do it, and you need to back it up with your understanding of the consumer, your data analysis, and so on. So marketing is a whole lot more than just advertising. Advertisements, I would say, are like the visible manifestation of a broader marketing strategy.
Got it. So from marketing to becoming an independent author per se. So how did that switch take place? Like, because like in your introduction as well, you talked about that you had been writing a lot in your college days. You were also the editor of the literary magazine at Bits Goa. So were you so confident that I'll be able to make it out as a freelance writer, approach publications, write for them? So what was going through your mind when you finally took that plunge?
I like to think of it as I had no choice because like I was very restless. I think throughout, maybe not so during when I was an engineer working at Amazon and so on, because at that time, like when I was 22, 23, I just felt like I had a lot of time in life and I was like, I can figure it out. I always had this like end goal of like, I'll learn management and business and then maybe work at a production company of my own or something in entertainment, because that would combine everything that I am interested in, right? Like it combined tech, because most things have an element of tech today. It would combine business, because like if it's a production company, you need to manage how that runs and functions, and also the creative element that would be the center of working in entertainment. So it was always the idea to do that, but like when the pandemic came around, I think like so I'd started writing. I would say my first long form story was for the Caravan in 2019, and even then I was like, okay, I'm only 26, I can figure it out, I have a lot of time. And then the pandemic came about like almost a year later, a little less than a year later, and suddenly I was in like this crisis where I felt like, we thought the world was ending. I mean, it literally was the so-called apocalypse, right? And my days at PNG started to feel much longer, because I was like, there's a lot of project management work to do there and less creative on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you're still in a creative profession marketing wise, but I just felt like I should be owning more of the creative stuff, right? Like the things that drew me to it most in the first place, like being the one who tells the story, who writes the ad, who scripts it out. So, and I'm still, as a writer, as much, I think, of a confused generalist than a specialist, because journalism is one form of writing that I do. But you asked about, what it's like to be a freelance marketer. So I write ads for startups. I mean, that's something I've just started doing the last, I would say, 4 to 6 months. I write scripts in case there's a content piece that someone's putting out, videos, etc., or content itself broadly. I've also, worked on 2 screenplays over the pandemic that I don't know if they'll ever see light of day, because you need to sort of know people and you need to reach out to them and you need to keep like pushing them to give you attention. And I've done a bit of that, but I'm also exhausted by how much work it takes. So the short answer to your question is like, how did yes, I was always writing, and towards like, and it was always on my plan to like do more of it. I think I got the impetus and the feeling that I cannot put it off any longer during the pandemic, because it just really felt like, if I were to die tomorrow, would I be happy doing what I'm doing? There's so many videos about Steve Jobs giving that. So I was like, took it so literally for these months from March 2020 to May 2020, like, that whole summer, I was just like, I felt like I was leading a double life, where I was like working on a job and trying to figure out how I can, get, to the other things that I wanted to do. So confidence wise, like, I didn't know whether it would work out or not. I just knew that I had to do my best to see if it would work out. And parts of it still haven't worked out, right? Like I said, there are some projects that I haven't been able to give the legs to. I've just, you think of it as like a baby that you're giving birth to. They're just like embryonic right now, and they haven't, been able to get up, walk, learn to talk and stuff like that. But some other things have been, I think, more successful in that sense that, it's becomes easier to approach publications if you've, got 1 or 2 under your belt, and then, so that's how it's been. Yeah.
Sure. So talking about the early days when you made this switch, so I think 2019 was the time when you started working with the editorial management team at the Caravan. I think that was the first time you actually started writing for a publication. And I think once the pandemic started, you approached The Ken, which is again a newsletter-based publication, and you started writing for them. for a couple of months. So how has this experience shaped your writing style? Like, because this was something new for you as well, writing for a newsletter. Maybe they're looking for something to put out daily. So what were your experience working with these two publications?
So they were both very different. So the Caravan is politics, culture, mostly long form writing, and the intent with that summer in 2019, as I said, right, like I had this view that I wanted to work in a creative industry, and mostly that would be entertainment. So at that time, I was debating between an internship at a company like Pocket Aces, which makes a lot of relatable young adult content, and the Caravan. I'd also applied to Ogilvy in Hong Kong, I think, but they never got back to me. So it was between the Caravan and Pocket Aces, and the Caravan materialized a lot faster. And I was like, I like this enough. I care about it enough to abandon the other idea. And I think it was great for me because it was great for me, and I hope for the org as well. Because I mean, when I got into the Caravan, there was a lot of things that I could look at from my internship at PNG and just general marketing, thinking of like how as a business things could be better. And I was happened to be in the right place at the right time and be the right person for the story that I wrote then, because it was kind of business oriented. It was like a analysis of Rajat Gupta's media narrative versus what actually happened. So I mean, I found that I was able to like analyze and string together a narrative in a way that was really fulfilling is the shortest way to do it. So I knew that like long form writing, the essays that I wrote in school and like in college and stuff was something I aspired to. Writing at the Ken and marketing at the Ken were both very different. I mostly wrote for the newsletter, as you observed rightly, and at the Ken I sort of learned this thing that I kind of still do apply whenever I write outside of it, which is to for a newsletter especially, like what they're looking for is some short take on something that's happening, and it was a daily newsletter, right? So very relevance and timeliness was very important, and so was since it was not just like, okay, this happened, it was more like this happened and here's what you can think about it. That's not something that many people are saying, that your formula of looking for something that's being talked about, that's going viral, and being able to generate a take on it that's slightly different. Say with the cred ad that came out, like everybody was talking about it, but we said something slightly different, and bunch of takes like that then that I applied later in my personal writing, especially since they were shorter, between like 1,000 to 1,500 words. It really makes you like pay attention to the world around you and start thinking, okay, like why did this happen and what can I say about it that's not being said already, right? And to do that in a short span of time was like really valuable to learn. So they were vastly different experiences as both a writer and a marketer at both these organizations.
Got it. And I think now that you are working as an independent writer, I think you, in your writings, I saw this, that you also do a lot of topical takes on current issues, as well as you write long form essays on things that interest you, mainly around politics, caste, religion, how marketing influences all of these things. So I wanted to understand that as a writer, like, is there a dichotomy going in your mind of writing for the audience and writing for yourself? Do you try to balance these two actively, or do you just go by what comes natural to you?
No, all the time. Like I feel like I'm in some kind of constant identity crisis where like I look at something and I'm like, is this something that I want to write, or is this something that I think people will want to read and therefore is coming to me? Or like, and then there are these phases where I think that there are all these things that I want to say that I don't think anybody's going to care about. So then should I even put it out? So I think, and I don't think it's just me as like a writer and a marketer who has this tussle, right? I think Bo Burnham has a special called Make Happy, or I think maybe there's a song in the special. I think I'm going to have to come back to the names, but Bo Burnham is this comedian who he did this special, I think in 2016-17, where the ending of the comedic special is him basically breaking down of sorts in front of the audience. He plays the piano, he has all these rants about, the relevance of a white man performing comedy, because the white male in America is the most powerful, social segment anyway. So like, what do I even have to say? He's kind of very self-deprecating and so on. And then towards the end of that segment, he's like, so he talks about how it kills him to be a performer who wants to make the audience happy, but also wants to make himself happy. And like, I think that really spoke to me, because I don't know, whether that perfect intersection is always easy to find, but you always want to find that intersection where it's as much you as it is, appealing for the audience. Because I don't think it's very satisfying to just go on rambling about what's in your head, and that's not interesting to anyone. Like, that's not the reading that shaped my life and made it great. Like, everything that I've read, all the content that I've consumed that saved my life in different difficult points, really influenced me. If they hadn't given a fuck about the audience, I don't think I would have really enjoyed it. At the same time, I know that they were really focused on being themselves. They never shied away from being strange or weird. It's always an intersection. And I think as a writer, I'm inclined to feel like I need to do this for myself. So, I mean, firstly, if I don't feel happy, then I don't think I should be doing it at all. So I think there is this element that I want to put, like, what I want to say first. And then I try to shape it and like, okay, how is this maybe relevant to something that people are thinking about, or maybe are in angles that they would care about, or like, largely socially relevant. But I am trying to do more work that even if it's not very useful, I just put out there anyway, right? Because why the hell not? So that's kind of where I am on this. I think it's like very constant desire to please others and also please yourself.
Yeah. So talking about your writing style, so is there any kind of schedule you follow? Like, you try to write daily, or any note making process you follow to jot down your thoughts, or are you working on multiple themes at one point of time? How do you go about any of these things you write?
So I think you asked three subparts to your how do you write things. So the first one is, do I have a routine? Very sadly, no. I try to stick to one, but most of the times I find that the thing that finally ends up getting published is published because of some urgency to it. Like, because I try to write every week or every 2 weeks. I'm working on some pieces or something, but I will throw that away when I feel like something more like. In October, I felt this especially because on 7th of October, 2020, I was leaving for a 10-day retreat called the Vipassana session, right? So in the lead up to 7th October, I was like, I'm not going to have access to the internet, my phone, all, books, whatever, like people, whatever it is that keeps, gives life meaning. I'm not going to have that for 10 days. So I need to like really put out as much as I want to before 7th, because I could feel this like angst building up. So before 7th, I had this like flurry of productivity, I would say. On 3rd, I stopped, all the things that I've been working on for a long time, and I just wrote something over 2 to 3 days. And I think that's okay, because if you're putting in the work, but some output is coming out somehow, it's fine. I don't really want to have too many rules, because that just makes it too hard to do a job. Because when you become perfectionistic and you get upset that you're not sticking to the routine, when the routine is not the point, it's just self-expression. So short answer is, I try to have a routine, but I'm also open to not sticking to it, which is just making my life very easier. I realize as I say it right now. So, your second question was about note taking. I think I used to use Google Keep a lot. For many years, I would just like store snippets of what I liked reading on Google Keep, tag it under the labels that it fit in, like quotes or interesting articles, or say some business concept or something like that. More recently, I would say since 2020, I've been using Notion a lot. Like, it's just made me, I think, a lot more productive. Like, my blog is based out of Notion, right? So, I mean, it's really brought out the more spontaneous side of me as a person and as a writer, which I'm very grateful for, because with earlier content management systems like WordPress and whatever, like Wix, etc., like you make a website, you write your content somewhere else, and then like you copy paste it into the website, and then you format it. And I used to like lose my shit in that time, because I'm like, I don't really care. This is like sapping the joy out of me, and it's not fun. And it's not like I can also write in these platforms, because they're very distracting. But Notion is like, it's seamless, because I can write in it and I can also publish from it. And it's got like very minimalistic editing tools, so I don't sit all day and like play with fonts and colors, etc. But it's also got enough for me to feel like, okay, this is customized, this is me. So Notion has been a game changer in terms of like publishing and thinking, and also note taking. More recently, I discovered how to use their tables and databases, etc. So when I'm like researching something that's a long form piece, and the references to that usually run into like dozens, like tens, 50, hundreds of articles or points from etc. So there's a database feature in Notion that makes it quite easy to catalog. Generally, I'm sort of like very, I've learned over time since I've bitten myself into like all that. It's very easy to like get lost in like, how does this work? And like, I want to use this tool and see if it's just curiosity, right? So when I find something that works, I tend to be loyal to it. So I hope I don't move away from Notion for a long time.
Got
Your
it.
third question was, I forgot your third part.
No, it was around this only.
I am in between many projects. I just hope I finish one of them like at any time.
So to delve deeper into this, I think let's take an example of a recent article you wrote that went really viral for 52.in, which is the Namesake. And I'll also drop in the link to these articles in the description for readers to check them out. But to give a broad summary, it was the story of how the name Sanjana came about, and from a particular 1993 advertisement, and what role that advertisement and naming a child plays in society at a more broader level. So first of all, right from the beginning of the idea, like how did this idea came about in your mind, and how did you think that we can actually write a long form article about this?
I think about the story a lot because I feel like I haven't written that much, like I talk about my work right now in this conversation, like I'm like, oh, I've produced so much, but I haven't written that much. But the Namesake so is especially special to me because I actually don't know when the idea for this story germinated, right? It's been many years because when I heard from my mom how I was named, it took a lot of time to figure out how I was named, because first she was just like, you're named after Hanuman's wife, Anjana. I was like, that's not Sanjana. My name is okay, so that's not even a real answer. So I was like, okay, what does Anjana mean? And then she'd say something like, I don't know, she had some meaning like God's wife and all of that. So then I asked my dad, like, okay, how was I named? And he mentioned the ad, which is like very straightforward, right? So then I asked my mom, she's like, oh yeah, you were named after the ad. I don't know why I said Anjana. So I thought it was very, I didn't know anybody else who was named after an ad. And so at that time, when I first went, I just remember it as like, oh, something cool to say. I was named after an ad. When it became more interesting to me as like a phenomenon, or like when I learned that it might have a more deeper meaning than just something to tell about your parents, is I had a friend whose sister's name was also Sanjana, and she, I think, is just a year younger than me. And I asked her how she got her name, and she's like, dude, my dad watched this ad with Aishwarya Rai in it. And I was like, dude, that's exactly how I was named. And I found that very strange at that point, because I thought, okay, I thought there had to be something more to it, that two people watched an ad and like they were smitten by the name and then they named their daughter after it. And that's when I realized that what are there more people like this, or even if it's just the two of us, what is the feeling that both our fathers had when they watched the ad, and what made them remember it and name their daughters after it. And then I started my job at PNG and I realized, okay, dude, ads are supposed to do exactly this, right? Like they're supposed to capture somebody's imagination. They're supposed to paint aspiration, which is exactly what Aishwarya did in her character and later on through her life, which is that as much as the character was very modern and she was wearing lipstick, red, wet hair, unafraid to be sexual, modern, just waltzing in, making the guy stop in his tracks at a time when like India, she was bold and like people remembered her for that. And then she also went on to have a very successful public career. So the way she captured people's imagination as a marketer, when I understood that, okay, dude, me being named after an ad is not trivial. And if somebody else has had the same story, that means that this ad has had the desired effect on like the public. The sample size seems to be 2 right now. How big is that sample? So when I first pitched the story, and again, a point to how Notion really helped me in my writing in general, is that I originally meant for this to be a blog post on my own blog, where like I wanted to write, I was named after a girl in a TV ad. But then I'd been reading 52's work, and I remember that I knew one other person. So what if I pitched a story of Sanjana's named after the ad? And 52 is a great, I really admired their work. So I really wanted to have my name there. I pitched it to them, and they were the ones who pushed me to like find out all the other Sanjanas who might have been named after the ad, to go after data. to also like some of the angles about aspiration and how it affects society. I knew I wanted to talk about that, and how even like the decision to name, like I think our lives are about social status, right? Like I think our lives are a constant, but I think that's all we think about. We're very social beings, and so even a simple decision or one word like a name encapsulating all the ways in which we think about aspiration was something that I wanted to go in depth upon. And the team, really made sure that we get all of the angles that we should, like gender, nature, caste, religion, everything, the full analysis, right? So it makes me very happy when I look back at that story, because I think it's something that I noticed about my life, and then over the years, the person I became helped me write. So I mean, and a lot of people would still say, I think, that you've done many different things. You've been an engineer, marketer, and a writer. So I think that they've all made me a better writer, because I don't think I would be able to analyze the world as well as I would like to think I'm able to now, without being, exactly the things that I was. So, I mean, I think I just have to justify it like that anyway.
No, I think that shows in your work, and I think it's a great article, and I would recommend the listeners at least to check it out from the description. So we'll talk about the advertising aspect that you mentioned about, but one another thing that I particularly found interesting about that article was how you reached out to people like astrologers and baby namers, and there was a study about names in the Delhi electoral roll and how popular was the name Sanjana. So I want to understand, like, how did you think of reaching out to these people? How did you approach them? Were they open to sharing their thoughts about this process with you?
Sure. So the shortest, I mean, the one word answer to your question is research. Like how do you know whom to reach out to, and who would be sources for the stories that like I said, when you set out to write, say, a long form essay, it's good to have some amount of pre-work done into it. Say even at the pitching stage, I've learned by making the mistake that you can't just be like, I want to write an article about this in one sentence. You need to sort of in your pitch demonstrate what the broad narrative arc is, where the story goes from A to B to wherever it ends, and why you are best placed to write it, and why right now is the best time to tell the story. So these are some common questions I think that a pitch should answer. So at the stage at which you're talking about, how did I get, say, data from Delhi voter rolls, or get astrologers and baby names to talk to me, I knew what the arc would be, right? Which is that there was this ad that Indian parents named their kids after, and that was because of some idea of the person they wanted to be, and how does the person we want to be differ based on our existing place in society already. And I think as an Indian, astrology is a part of our lives. My family also, my dad used to talk about astrology at home. He believes that there are versions of it that are accurate. And we've had this discussion also, right? Like, is astrology fantastic and crazy, or is there actually some legitimacy to it? And I like his answer to that, which is that as with even founders and CEOs, you hear this difference, right? There are analytical founders like Jeff Bezos who will look at everything, all possibilities, and with no intuition, just through analysis, arrive at what to do. Unlike Steve Jobs, who was very intuitive, who just knew what to do from his gut and followed that. So he presented that for astrologers, saying that there are a lot of astrologers who say that they can calculate using this and that and tell you what to do. And he said that he tends to find that there are more frauds in this category, because it's easier to say that I'm looking at all of these things and appear to have a case, versus some people he's met in his life who've just had like very intuitive ways of, like, you just look at them, their eyes are shining and they tell you, okay, this is what's going to happen. So I was like, that's an interesting way to look at it. And I knew that, like, we consult astrologers for everything. By we, I mean Indians broadly. Like, I think astrology is a segment that, even in terms of startups and businesses, is booming right now, especially during the pandemic, because people are more anxious. They're looking for comfort and solace as to what's going to happen tomorrow. So I knew that astrologers would have something to do with baby names. And I mean, it's not rocket science. They did. And so I looked up astrologers, baby naming consultants. A bunch of results came up, spoke to a few of them, their most interesting anecdotes. And, you interview people, you transcribe them. How I write a story is that I like to have all the material that's relevant to this, broad thing I want to say in one place, and then I'm sitting and looking at it, trying to see which dots to connect in what order. And in many ways, writing is similar to programming in that sense, but maybe that's a different discussion. So yeah, that's how I reached out to these people and got them to. And here, my interviewing experience with marketing actually really helped me. Another point to people who think that there's very disparate fields and how did you switch is that I've probably done like hundreds of consumer interviews through my marketing now, like internships and Caravan and my time at PNG. Like you need to talk to consumers to know exactly where what you're selling fits in their life, to know what comfort or what emotion you generate in them, so that you can just relay that back to them and right, like that's basically what it is. So I had a lot of experience in talking to people and interviewing them for finding out like how they feel about their lives, etc. So I think that I mean, principles wise, it's you need to get the story out of the person you're talking to, even in other contexts. So that's how it happened.
Got it. And one final question about writing. So I have seen across your writings that you use Twitter a lot as a source of research to get to know what people are talking about, what is their take, contradictory opinions on things. So what is your strategy when you are using Twitter? Because I feel, be it with Twitter or any other social media platform, I mean, there's great content, but I think that's like 10% or like 5% of all the tweets that are sent. And like there's 95% content, which is just the same thing being repeated again, trying to keep you hooked on, or something that you would enjoy reading, but it's not really worthwhile to anything you would do in life. So how do you balance that out when you are especially looking at research?
I think I don't have a very clear or predefined strategy that every time I use Twitter for an article, I'm going to use it the same way. Twitter's one caveat to note is that Twitter is relevant for the story that it's relevant to, or like circles that you're writing about, right? Like I don't think it's good to think of Twitter as, for example, if you're writing about I don't know, BJP or the elections or something, there's so much misinformation and generated content that you cannot use those as very accurate barometers for what's really happening. But in some cases, it's even outside of that, like when you're saying that this is what some people are saying, or this is what some other people are saying, you do say it as, okay, this is what one Twitter user had to say. So people know that it's a tweet, right? So I mean, it's not like presented as anything but that. So that's important to keep in mind. And so a tweet is just like one fraction of reality, but it is what it is also. So I don't have a definite strategy as such, how to tell apart the content that is legitimate versus not. I mean, I think obvious misinformation is perhaps easy to tell versus two people who have both typed their things well, but I think both are then just fair game, and like what people say is what people say. So you cannot call it like, I don't know if it's shit posting or it's an opinion. So yeah.
And when do you think like this amount of research is enough? Like, to put this in perspective, like you recently wrote an article on FLOC, which is how Google tracks data about their users, and how. So essentially, like I went through that article. It's a fascinating article, but to basically come up with that article, you have to go through the comic they have published, even the papers they have written about FLOC, the circular diagram. I think like being from an engineer background obviously helps, but like when do you know that this much research is enough research? Because I think there's no end to how much you can read or research about something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you have to, there's always some level of like, I think when you're in the process of researching, you're always a little anxious to make sure that, I'm not leaving anything out, but it's not that hard to define. There are a couple of ways to define like when to stop, right? One is that when you have no more whys to ask, like, so with each thing that you hit that explains a level above, like, so you're stating, say, XYZ, why XYZ, you go to another level, ABC is why XYZ, and then you go to ABC, why ABC, okay, then you say like, whatever, GHI is why ABC. And then when you like, you get to a level where like, okay, this is obvious and this doesn't need explaining, or this is agreed upon, or this is established in the context of the thing that I'm writing about, is a place that you can say is like, okay, here is where the base starts, and here is where I can build up further layers of argument on top of that, or argument or inference or whatever. The second thing is to know like what the framework or what the structure of your story is, right? Like, for example, especially with namesakes, as a good example to talk about it, that piece was about 8,000 words long at its longest draft, and it's about half of that right now. So at that point, it's important to go back to like what was it that I set out with when I wanted to tell the story, and to then cull it in the shape of that. So from going from the 8,000 word to the 4,000 word, I think all of the extra parts were things about like my own digressions about how I came into this realization, and a lot of material about ads in the 90s in general that you don't see in the final piece. And that's how you notice. So maybe you don't know how much research is enough when you're doing the research. You just get as much as you can to tell the story that you have in your mind. And then you go back to that idea of the story again and again, and you see that, okay, actually this is not really that core to the central narrative that I'm painting, and you cut it off. So it's a bit of like one is like you need to know how you would define stopping, and one is also like maybe that's ambiguous for certain cases, so you go and you get it, and then you cull it till it fits the requirements, the brief, so to speak.
Got it. So let's talk about advertising now, since this is something that you have written about, even worked in this space for quite some time. So I'll talk about what is my perspective on advertising when I looked at it. So I used to have this notion that like ads are only a tool to talk to people about that this is my product and this is how it can help you in your life. And maybe this is why we are the best out of all the competing products. But I think broadly the ads that I see on online or television right now can be broadly clubbed into three categories. Like one is maybe they're trying to be funny and trying to crack a joke or do something like that. Second, maybe they're trying to address some social issue which may or may not be relevant to what they're actually doing, but trying to highlight some of the social inequalities or issues that are in news right now. And third is I think they're just playing upon the brand ambassador. There's a famous celebrity who's just selling that product without really talking about that product or how is it even useful. So I want to know your perspective on, because at the starting of the podcast, we also talked about how advertisements can also be aspirational. Like it does not only have to be a product, it can set aspirations in a society. So what is your view on advertising? Is it still relevant today? Is it broken? Is it still an effective means of communication?
Got it. I think you asked two big questions and one of them has sub-questions. So I'll just take the first one, which is that what are ads and like how can you break them down? I mean, you seem to have come up with certain categories, which I would say are like very pertinent ways of observing how ads do what they do, either through humor or through talking about a cause or through playing up a celebrity. But just so you're talking about categories of how ads do what they do. But to take a step back, I think like what ads are, I mean, I think, to your question of are they broken or a relevant form of communication today? I think Varun Duggi has had this podcast called Advertising is Dead since I think 2014. I don't know, it's been years since, people have been saying, since we're in an environment that's so saturated, very consumerist world that we live in, ads all the time. Wherever you look, there's an ad. So, but we keep saying is advertising dead. I don't think so. I don't think it will ever be dead, because I think we will be in a capitalistic setup for the foreseeable future. I don't think that we're suddenly going to become like, okay, we should not get people to buy things, and as long as you're buying things, I think there will be ads, and I think ads will be relevant despite of all our saturation with them, is because they're still. What drew me to ads, I think. The articulation that I'm able to arrive at today to explain my fascination with them for a while is that they're a very powerful and efficient form of communication. An ad is usually 30 to max 1 minute long, but there's so many things that they have to achieve, and being on the other side making an ad has helped me realize all of that, right? Like they need to firstly catch your attention. So many ads, you need to watch an ad. They need to connect to you emotionally, then they need to convince you to either remember something or take action. So there's so much that piece of communication has to achieve, that there's a lot of thought and intelligence and creativity that I think goes into making a good ad. So no, I don't think that they're going anywhere. I think that we have ads and we keep having debates about whether ads are dead. But I think they'll just be there. Maybe that's a good idea for an ad also, or this ad is dead. But anyway, so that should answer like one part of your question. So coming to like what kinds of ads there are, I mean, this is something that I learned. I think in my first week at PNG, I had like this exact same question where we were debating between putting out this ad that was about the product, like it's what is the problem, here's this how this product technically helps you solve it, like like if you have talcum powder, then say the problem is rough skin, and then talcum powder smooth skin, so like very functional ad. And then you have your emotional ads that may or may not talk about directly the product's functional use, but emotionally the kind of benefits that you would get from being associated with that brand. And you would see a lot of Ariel's Share the Load is about kind of, it's in like progressive households where women have to split the it's a little bit about the function of Ariel, but mostly it's about this emotion of what it means to be a woman in the household. So that's one categorization of types of ads. I think everything else about how ads achieve what they do in either of these two categories, there'll be many types, right? So hyperbole or exaggeration is a very good way of like connecting emotionally to someone, like being funny, humorous. Social causes, if a brand believes that consumers care about something, then that's just their way of connecting with them. So it could be either, I think mostly this falls into the second category of like kind of emotional ads, social causes, being associated with the brand for more than this, its functional uses. Celebrities for credibility and so on, right? So there are many ways that brands achieve what they do, but I think broadly they'll fall into like more technical benefits or like more of the intangible emotional benefits of being with a brand. And I think both of them serve the aim of like just using the brand, right? Like buyers, basically.
So since now, so you talk about this, so is there also an element of wokeness that we talk about, that should brands be woke and should consumers be woke in the first place, and should brands recognize that their consumers are woke and address them? And also what exactly does this word woke mean? Because I personally don't have a very clear understanding of this word, and I think thanks to social media, a lot of good words really gain a lot of bad publicity very fast. So I think woke is, I think, one of those words which started off maybe with a good meaning, but now it is being paraded sarcastically or probably with the wrong connotation. So what is your take around this?
Yeah, I mean, so the definition of woke, as I would understand, and I'm sure I've looked it up myself to know exactly what it means, but I think woke means someone who is awake or cares about social justice, issues about whether people are being treated well, equality, and so on. So I'm sure there's a better definition on, but that's what I think woke means. The question of should consumers be woke and should brands be woke is something I think about every day, because it seems to be, I think, the most not wokeness per se, but like conversation at a hyper level. Constant conversation is I think the biggest change that I've grappled with as I transitioned into my 20s, right? Because I did not imagine the world would be so full, so full as a child. I just thought like, okay, computers, tech, but like tech having these social ramifications and implications is very interesting. So should they or shouldn't they? I mean, I think people should do what they believe in, what makes them happy. So if consumers, and the connotation of wokeness being sort of pejorative or being used in sarcastic context is when people are woke but not with the intentions of truly helping something, but just for gaining social currency, right? So and I mean, if that's what you want to do, then okay. I mean, I guess I don't really have a lot of opinions on whether people do is good or bad, because I think we're all hypocrites at the end of the day. So like, yeah, should consumers be woke if you so desire, and should brands be woke? Yeah, if that's what you think is going to get people to connect with you and further your cause with them, then sure. But I think the criticism that's typically thrown at brands when they try to be woke is that you're just doing this for wokeness, much like perhaps the consumer himself or herself, or themselves. But for brands, I think the responsibility is a bit higher than, say, an individual who is hypothetically being woke just for the sake of it. Is because they have, or they, I mean, they have the resources to truly make a difference, right? So don't just talk about something without actually doing something that helps. So I think there are a lot of brands that do purpose-driven campaigns is the better word for it than woke campaigns. Like when you talk about a social cause and you align yourself to the purpose of making something that's not right with society better. It's helpful to not just talk about it, but also like back it up with, I don't know, CSR or many initiatives, right? Like Lifebuoy's campaign, they distributed a lot of like even there's so many brands, like most of P&G's brands, when they do these purpose-driven campaigns, also have like an initiative on top of which they talk about it. The criticism that's leveled to this kind of purpose-driven advertising and brand building is that, oh well, you're just doing this because you want social currency and you want attention. And I'm like, yeah, obviously their brands, their purpose is not to be activists and change society while being frugal and living on the bare minimum. Their primary purpose is profit. Their secondary purpose is helping society in a way that connects with people, right? So I mean, even if their objective is to benefit themselves, as long as they're doing what they can do in their framework and in a meaningful way, I think it's all right to talk about social causes, because if it's generally what people care about, then you cannot blame a brand for wanting to connect with them on that premise. I think it's more often than not badly done, however. Outside of the examples that I mentioned, like the Lifebuoy campaigns and P&G's campaigns in general, Dabur, was it Dabur Femme who had that LGBTQI ad campaign about two women celebrating Karwa Chauth, and most of them, I don't think, display any sort of understanding about the problem that people have an issue with and what they would like to be better. I think they just talk about something because they think people are talking about it, and which is why they go wrong. And therefore, the criticism of being woke just for the sake of being woke is valid. So that's my whole take on this whole thing. Is that
Got it. Yeah. So let's also talk about some of the projects we have worked on as an independent marketing consultant. So just to help our listeners understand, what are these kind of projects? What do the deliverables look like? What is it that you bring to the table? And is there some metric by which these brands or you measure that how effective these campaigns have been? Maybe if you can give us some recent example you have worked on, I think that would be great.
Sure. So I think I've been doing marketing consulting work for about, I would say, six months or so. Most of it has been with a company called Atlin, and I write ads for them. I used to be doing a lot of the execution part of campaigns itself, where like say I mean, they have like a launch or something, then coordinate with the partners, set up the event, make sure it goes live properly, communicate, basically your typical marketing job. I think I'm more and more interested in seeing what it's like to be the core creative part of what drew me to marketing at first, right? Like writing the ads, scripting a film. I was doing that also for Atlin, but I think I'm going to be doing more of that for more brands now, for including another one called Stua. So projects, they depend on like the brief or what marketing problem someone is trying to solve right now. Timelines also kind of depend on that. How the work is measured is, say it's like a campaign launch or something. So how many views does it get? Like your typical metrics, how many people engage with it? If you spent money on it, so what were the returns like? General like cohesiveness in terms of working efficiency, things like that. So yeah, I mean, personally, I think I'm glad for this period of exploration, because it was like always a thing, right? Like this is what it's like to be, the one on the marketing side, project managing, telling people how to make the ads, etc. It's good to be slightly transitioning towards the other side, just to see what it's like in this side of the world, because I really think that, I mean, I don't know if this is still true, but there used to be this. I used to have this feeling a lot more. I used to have this perception that people believe by the time you're 28, you should be like sorted and you should be in the job that you will be in forever. I feel that perception less, maybe because right now the pandemic is a time of great disruption and flux, and a lot of new ways of being and making money have opened up, which is very like personally, I find that very invigorating and exciting. And I don't hope to figure it out anytime soon because like these things take time, right? Like to truly understand how something works, you need to do it for a while, and you need to see how you feel in those points, and then you need to like coherently determine from there what you want to do. So I don't know maybe exactly what's next, but I'm happy to be in this in between many things right now.
Got it. One other question I had was about cold mailing. So let's say right now that you have written a lot of articles, you have a lot of work, so you can pitch your work to people to establish your credibility and to take a call on whether they want to work with you or not. But let's say in 2019, when you were approaching the Caravan, or even when you approached the Ken, essentially you would have to pitch yourself as an individual that I am someone who is interested in this, who is willing to work on that. And sure, like your educational background and work experience helps you build some credibility that you will be a dedicated employee. But at the end of the day, it's just a cold pitch. So what is your opinion on that? How did you go about it? Do you think they actually work? Because a lot of people have apprehensions that cold mailing does not usually yield results.
Yeah, this is something I've been meaning to write a blog post or social media a how-to or something, because it's such a like people want to know how to write successful cold emails, right? I think more often than not, I mean, they've worked for me. My Caravan application wasn't a cold email. They had like a portal on which you could apply. But yeah, it was, I did write them an email and a pitch of sorts. The Ken also, I would say, took longer than it needed to for them to like sort of go through things. I guess it takes them like many submissions, but they did comment on like the email's efficacy because that's what opened the future doors. I think what works for me in writing emails is what works for me in the rest of my writing, which is I try to be writing as myself most of the time. I try to write as I would speak. I try to be interesting. I try to be funny a little bit if there is room for it. And maybe I talk about like why I'm asking for what I'm asking for and why somebody else should care. So it's important to answer these questions in any like it's the question that any reader has when they're reading anything, right? Like, why should I be reading this right now? And like, what am I going to get out of it? So, and if you can do that skillfully and in a way that's interesting and authentic and representative of you as an individual, I think that the amount of information you give away in a cold email is more than just, hey, I'm interested in this, and can you do something for me? So I think your question was like, what do I think of cold emailing and how did I go about doing it? The summary of it would be I try to answer these questions about why someone should read it and why they should act on it, and I did so while being myself, trying to write well, being interesting, authentic, and so on.
Got it. And I think you really should write that post about cold emailing because like I definitely would like to read it because I personally have benefited a lot from cold reading, even if I talk about this podcast only. So like I did try to use I Am Calcutta as a brand to get people excited about coming on the show. But there's only certain leverage that you can get using your college brand name. So at the end of the day, I think I also started out reaching out people through cold emails only to approach them on my podcast because I did not have a single subscriber or a social media following or anything like that. So I think they do work so I think that would be something interesting to write about and read about.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm always very pleased when someone encourages me to write something because it's like, okay, maybe I should not just shelve it in my notes forever. So I'll try to take that up. Thank you.
Yeah. So one interesting question I have, like this is something that came up in this discussion, was those 10 days you spent in the Vipassana center. So that is something I'm interested to know about, like what was the experience? What was the objective when you like decided to go ahead and any learning or any takeaways from that course?
So I won't comment on the experience in great depth because it's something that I think I know it surprises me that it's been about 3 to 4 months since I finished it, but I think the effects and like how it's continuing to shape my understanding of life and myself is something I want to come to terms with in a way that I can articulate it without sounding supremely lost and confused, because it was a very disorienting experience in many ways. Like several things happened and I came out and I went down this rabbit hole of reading about free will and determinism and neuroscience and the unconscious. And so at some rabbit holes are not healthy. Like some rabbit holes you'd be like, I need to stop this research, right? So yeah, I mean, short answer, how the experiences, it was very intense. You will experience something and it's different for everyone. So I can speak about what mine was. That it was intense, a bit disorienting, still trying to learn in a way that I can articulate what it was for me. What the other two questions that you had about it is something that I can answer back, like why did I do it and what did I want from it, right? So I think I wanted to, I just generally felt that I could be more prolific, more productive, write more of the things. Like I told you at the beginning of this call that there are some topics that I shy away from putting out because I think that nobody will be interested in them. Uh, and so that's not who I want to be as an artist. Okay, like writer, marketer. That's not. I want to just put out whatever comes to me without thinking too much about it. So there were like these. I think everyone. This is popular. This is a popular saying in your psychedelic self-help spirituality circles that everything you need is within you, right? So I kind of felt that introspection or whatever this Vipassana thing was. I'd heard about it from a friend about 3 to 4 years before I did it. And she told me, and she came out of it like profusely thankful for my existence. And she called me like her family and stuff. So I was like, yeah, if it made you feel that way about me, then maybe I will feel that way about, everything else outside in the world. And maybe it'll make me more productive and more prolific, more comfortable in my own skin as an artist and whatnot. I don't know if it's done that yet because like after Vipassana there was New Year's and like you just generally like tune out and like I'm just getting back into a routine and all that, which is why I think that some time needs to pass for me to know what it was like as an experiment. But I would recommend it to everyone for a reason, even though I don't have the answers to questions like is it really what has it done for me, right? I don't have an answer to that yet. But I would recommend it to everyone because I think that there are some fundamental things that everyone has, like by the time you've gone through enough life, even if like I have a friend who's done it when he was 16, 17, I think it really makes you feel what you have inside you, right? Because feeling as a word is very misunderstood because we think of emotions and feelings as this very intangible thing that they're just like things that I produce and they have no weight and like they can come and go, and they do come and go, but they have a basis in our existence in the sense that feelings are physical. They have like when you're hurt, you actually are hurt on your skin, like you feel it somewhere, right? Like they're very bodily sensations. So to actually feel what is inside you and to feel is very physical. It's very overpowering in some ways, and I think it's the closest I've come to a sort of otherworldly experience, right? Like you think like life, like the fabric of reality. Like, I wake up, I know how to move and stuff, but in that time you can experience sensations and a way of reality that's really like nothing that I've ever seen before. And I'm still fascinated by this whole area. That's why I would recommend it. Nothing to lose, and it's very new and intense.
Sure. That's quite interesting. So final question before we call it a wrap. So you recently became part of the South Asia Speaks class of 2022, and you are working under the mentorship of Sanam Maher to write your own book. So something about this book, what are your aspirations behind it? What is it going to be about?
Yeah. So as again, I have to thank Notion for all this, because the idea for this book was I was working on my blog for a few weeks in like May, April last year. And the first version of the blog that you see right now was actually the summary of the book that I'm working on. I wrote that and I was like, this isn't actually a blog post introduction. This is something that is like, one time coherent read about a certain subject with, specific divisions to it. I think this is a book. And that's when I realized that actually, I didn't actually realize it. I mean, I've been meaning to, write a book I think I've had a book in me for now that I'm working on it for a long time. So it's going to be a collection of essays about India based on my life, because as I told you, right, like in asking this question of who I am, why I am the way I am, and how I got here, essentially, like with the namesakes, you never see something as a phenomenon that's isolated from everything else it's surrounded by. So I'm sure that things about my life, say things about the way we live in our country and in the world that we are in today. And that's basically what I hope to write about here.
Yeah, got it. So yeah, one last question now. Like this just came to my mind. Like since you are from IIM Calcutta as well, so what role do you think IIM Calcutta played in your life? Be it friends, studies, academics, teachers, networking, in your career, in your personal life, do you think it had an important role to play? And what are your memories about that?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, when I said like I gave CAT without really expecting anything, and I sort of looked at it as like a good thing to do to switch from this job that I wasn't sure was for me. And it was in IIM Calcutta. I think there were a lot of times I felt that this was a very weird experience, and definitely very different from what I experienced at BITS also, where I could only articulate that once I was in IIM Calcutta, like people from all over India with a lot of aspirations about what IIM Calcutta means to them. So definitely broadened my view of what it means to be there actually, right? Like I think certain parts of the circles I'm in would be like, okay, but it is also an institution of significance. Very fascinating to time also, because all of the things that you think happen in college kind of with IIM Calcutta, it's very, very surprising. I don't know, you should actually tell me because you're now studying virtually, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, but I mean, on campus, it was very exhilarating. A lot of parties, a lot of people, fun times, a lot of strange times as well, a lot of processes and rituals, I would say that I don't quite know what to do with even now. I'm hoping it'll form for some interesting reading sometime in the future. But how it's affected me personally and professionally, I mean, yeah, I do have friends from there, people who get me. Professionally, I'm sure, like, brand names, people were in a very busy world. Heuristics are all that we use to, tell people apart from each other. So I'm sure the brand names, like you reached out to me because we had this in common. So, yes, it definitely helped me. I think I was also at the age where I think I was learning how to think better, and so to do that in an environment like IIM Calcutta, where the degree, I would say, an MBA degree is very gen, right? Like you have a business, finance, economics, organizational behavior, a bit of like history, social theory, etc. I love basically the breadth of the degree. I think it helped me become a better thinker.
Oh, that's great. So I think
not to say that it couldn't have been better or that there weren't flaws. There were, but
yeah.
I mean, I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. I think that's the story with everything in life. So
exactly.
I think it has been great talking to you, Sanjana, and I particularly like reading your work a lot. And I think the way like you draw from your own life, from the society, as well as what is actually happening out there, and connect them through references with literary works, what people are saying, what is your own opinion. I think that's something I really look forward to reading, and I would be looking forward to reading your book as and when it comes out. And I would also recommend the listeners to check out some of your work, whatever interests them. So thanks a lot for taking out time for this episode, and I think this has been useful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Praval. It was great fun chatting with you, and I'm so glad that I could be useful. I hope we speak again soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and that's a wrap.